I'm here at the Friendly Center in Greensboro, North Carolina, where there's a Mercedes-Benz high-powered charging station. Reason being, a very similar station just opened up in Colorado. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, the astute observer will recognize a missing Rivian in this shot, breaking continuity, and the reason being is because I finished shooting this video and got in the car and started driving home, and just as I was approaching the interstate, I realized I neglected to mention the title story for this video, which is the BP Pulse Gigahubs opening in California. And so after scolding myself in inner dialogue for a good amount of time, I figured the right thing to do was turn around and come back, and the Rivian is now gone. So that's the long story. Okay, very briefly touching this station before we talk about BP Pulse and a few other things. This is the Friendly Center in Greensboro, North Carolina, with a relatively new installation of a Mercedes-Benz high-powered charging. The station that opened this past week is in Colorado in the town of Thornton, near the Denver Premium Outlets, north of Denver. And it's not actually on the property of the Denver Premium Outlets, it's headed into it. There's a small strip mall headed into the Denver Premium Outlets area, and that's where Mercedes-Benz built into. It's right off Interstate 25, and Mercedes-Benz has been known to kind of like blink a station as being open in the alternative fuels data center database, but it actually not being commissioned in their systems completely. So if you're planning to go there to get a charge, make sure you have a backup plan, because it might not be fully commissioned yet. But it is showing in the alternative fuels data center database. Now for our title stations, the ones that are of most note this past week, BP Pulse opened 2 Gigahubs at international airports in the state of California. Now, when I say opened, they showed up in the alternative fuels data center database, and very similar to Mercedes-Benz showing them as being open in the alternative. All that is a record getting propagated to the government database. It doesn't necessarily mean they're commissioned. And specifically with BP Pulse, they posted into social media they're having a load test event later this month at the LAX Gigahub. 48 stalls. This thing is a monster. It also has one of the dispensers off to the side that has accessibility, but 46 of the stalls are underneath the canopy with Alpitronic hyperchargers and tritium chargers. There's also an attached lounge. I understand from PlugShare post the attached lounge is not actually fully open yet. Likely it will be by the time they do the load test. There's some touching up they had to do in order to get that place open, in order to have people who are frequenting the station, of which is primarily designed for rideshare people going to and from LAX, to have a place for a restroom and concessions or vending of some sort. So really beautiful station. Not only in LAX, they also are doing San Francisco International Airport. Both opened up into the alternative fuels data center database on the same day. I don't know how much more significant it could get. 2 Gigahubs opening on the same day in the state of California, which is notoriously a very difficult place to open stations. One of them is 48 stalls underneath the canopy with Alpitronic hyperchargers. These are beautiful stations. So kudos to BP Pulse. What an absolutely fabulous week they've had. And I'm sure there's going to be much fanfare over these stations in the coming weeks and months, because they are just very Instagrammable. And I'm sure the good folks who drive electric vehicles in Los Angeles are just going to love to death being able to take Instagram pictures of themselves in front of this very beautiful station right next to their international airport. Also, at the tail end of last week, I mentioned about an Electric Era station opening, and it turns out it's open, but it's not open. It's soft opening is the way they're describing it. A little bit complicated, but let's go to Eric Way, who explained this situation much better than I can. Here's a person who should not be unfamiliar to anyone who is into electric vehicle charging or electric vehicle YouTube channels. One of the people who basically invented the genre Eric Way from the News Coolum channel. Back when back doing EV cool things before EVs were cool.
Yeah, well, and then it works out because I was never cool. So,
and here we are. Welcome to 2025 with DC fast chargers exploding all over the United States. The be careful what you wish for scenario is now starting to play out. At least that's the impression I'm getting. But in particular, I understand there was a state. Well, there's this station that recently opened, and I understand, Eric, that you were there when it was under construction. I'm talking about the Electric Era station in Williams, California, and I believe it's directly off the Interstate 5 corridor or the exit in Williams. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, well, Williams actually has a couple of exits off the freeway, and this was the more southern one because the northern one is actually it works with Highway 20. So there's a real nice junction point there to cross east-west versus north-south. So this is just south of that, basically in downtown Williams, where all of the amenities really are, all the restaurants and shops and things like that. So yeah, it's a really nice exit. Just right off the exit is where the Electric Era site went in.
And before we get into the specifics of the site, because there's a couple of things that I've found of interest with this location and the reason why we're spotlighting it. But specifically, the northern portion of the state of California, I believe it's commonly referred to as the North State, basically from Sacramento and points northward, where the terrain starts to become a little bit more severe in grade, and population centers start to become more dispersed. I know when I was living in the mountains of Western North Carolina, just because of the grading of the terrain, little pockets of populations were kind of governed by level land is basically what it was, and areas where there was river and water and whatnot. So I'm assuming in the North State, the terrain basically is what's keeping things sparsely populated. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the also seems to be a very sparse amount of DC fast chargers. So when you think of California, you think of just, electric vehicle wonderland, but that's not so much the case up there. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I mean, it's also a lot of ag land, and so what you end up with is large ranches, large farms, and so the communities tend to be smaller and more spread out, and then just lots of land in between. I'm sorry.
No. I just said, okay.
Yeah. So, and actually for about the first 100 miles north of Sacramento, like you mentioned, it's mostly flat, a little bit of a grade going up. And then is when you hit the sort of mountains, and it's another 150 miles before you get into Oregon. And, you're talking about 4,000 foot grades that you're climbing over. So it gets pretty mountainous. Winter weather, there's chain advisories, things like that. So you're getting more into that northwestern sort of climate and topography like you see in like Idaho and Washington and Oregon. So,
and is it fair to say that the early rounds of funding that the state of California allotted for electric vehicle charging by and large were passed over for that area of the state?
It definitely seems like it. So there are three main corridors that you can go through the North State, north-south, and I-5 is the central one, Interstate 5. And to the west of that, you have Highway 101, which is a fairly scenic route that goes up along the coast through the redwoods. And then to the east, you have Highway 395, and that is a true charging desert. So there are no DC fast chargers north of Reno, basically,
Wow.
until you hit the Oregon border, and even then, it's hundreds of miles into Oregon. And Tesla somewhat rectified that by adding a couple of V3 superchargers along that route. And so that one's really sparse. And then I-5 has more chargers, but a lot of them are 50 kilowatt. And I'm actually doing a video upcoming pretty soon, because most of those are they might as well be stranded assets. I know Kyle visited, I think it was the EV Gateway in Reading when he was at the supercharger, and it was just 4 50 kilowatt posts in the ground. I think I saw one of those posts powered one time, and then from then on, it's just abandoned, right? So you do have some pips along the map, but they're all, 24 kilowatt, 50 kilowatt, and it's really hit or miss whether any of them are still online. And then Electrify America, they're sort of mandated by the state to build disadvantaged communities and along the freeways. And we had 3 chargers, I think 4 chargers north of Sacramento along I-5. So that's a 250, 300-mile strip, and you have like 4 charging sites, and they're not the most reliable. And when one of them goes down, the one in Anderson went down one time for upgrades, and I think it's the only one along that route that's gone down, that's been upgraded to their new V4 hardware. And when it went down, people just didn't know what to do. Like, people were getting stranded, they were getting completely caught off guard, because it's such an important linchpin in that connecting route north-south.
And it's so strange to me because when you look at areas that are very desolately populated in the South, like Bakersfield, I guess they're benefiting as a result of the population center of Los Angeles trying to traverse other points out. So they need charging as they're going out or something. But Bakersfield is just swarm, or Baker, California also has got tons of charging. And
that's the Baker is more of the Vegas connection.
Correct.
And,
yeah. So that whole pathway into Vegas and Bakersfield going back up into the north. It seems like there's just a ton of infrastructure. But once you start venturing past Sacramento, things just really start to thin out, uncharacteristic for other points throughout California. It's just very strange to me.
Right. Yeah.
And so what I was going to say is that this location is starting to help alleviate some of that dearth. Is that your opinion as well?
Yeah. So Electric Era has done a great job in adding infrastructure to that Northern California route. So that I-5 route north of Sacramento, Williams is the southernmost. And then they have a spat of like 3 or 4 chargers within 150 miles of the Oregon border. So basically Mount Shasta, Weed, and Wairika. And so this is the first one that's this far south that's sort of bridging that gap. And there's still about 160-mile gap, though, between Williams and Mount Shasta, the next Electric Era north. So they still have some room to grow and to fill in, but it's definitely adding bandwidth, and it's adding throughput, as I like to put it, and for the charging infrastructure in the North State.
Definitely an opportunity, and I don't know how other CPOs have missed this, but Electric Era standing in is opportunistic for them, and definitely an area to grow, and they can go to points elsewhere. There's definitely many locations that I see in Plugshare with them as the CPO listed for coming soon. But specifically for this site, you were there during its initial phase of construction, and we now have chargers in the ground that are energized, and Electric Era is fairly well known for abbreviating those timelines more so than other CPOs are able to. Was that the case for this station as well?
Yeah, I think from the time they broke ground until the time of the soft opening was, I'd have to mark my calendar, but I think it's like 35 days. So just over a month. And what makes that amazing is it's California, right?
This is breakneck speed for Ohio, let alone California.
Yeah. So the construction itself, and this is true of a lot of other companies. I have the Pilot in my background here, the Pilot Flying J sites. Those only take about 30 days to physically construct. But then it's getting the power in, then it's getting the inspections in, and that can take 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. In California, sometimes 6 or more months. And so having this sort of average start to finish time of around 30 days to get a site built I think it gives Electric Era a huge advantage.
So the other point that I wanted to bring up, that although this station has been listed as open on the Alternative Fuels Data Center database, you refer to it as a soft opening. So like right now, can I pull into the station and get a charge? Is it like open, like
Yeah,
available?
it is open. And so when I say soft opening, my understanding is it had not received in California. You have to get a weights and measures certification. So there's two aspects to that. The equipment has to be listed on their site as an official approved equipment. But then once it goes in and gets powered up, they actually have to send someone from weights and measures on site to test the equipment and validate that it's actually accurately registering the amount of energy that's outputted. So when I say it's a soft opening, it technically can't open until that. And so when I plugged in, it was free, and I think it was going to be free to use until basically they can dispense for free all they want, but the moment you want to charge, if you will, you have to have that weights and measures certification in California. So that's an additional regulatory requirement. So
I understand. So this station, is it 8 stalls? Is that correct? Fed from 4 chargers.
Yeah.
That's way on the high end for stall count in that area of I-5. Is that fair to say? I mean, Tesla normally puts in 8 minimum, but for non-Tesla CPOs to put in 8 stalls in an area like that is noteworthy.
Yeah, and I mean, and that seems to be their average or baseline, maybe in California. As you said, like Tesla, notwithstanding, because they have ranging from 8 to 10 to 12 to 20 stalls at a site. But the other public charging providers, Electric Era is traditionally, Electrify America is traditionally one of the larger sites. All of their sites in Northern California are 4 stalls, 4 dispensers, 4 stalls. So this is literally doubling the stall count compared to the Electrify America stations.
So all those things combined, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but all these things combined, where the North State was mostly devoid of the major rounds of funding for electric vehicle charging and the targeting of CPOs in other areas of California, the higher stall count, the 8 stalls that are available with brand new hardware, and the amazingly abbreviated installation time frame that this went through, all combined to make this station very noteworthy and giving local EV drivers a lot of hope for what might be coming in the future.
Electric Era is kind of the managing CPO, but this is under the Sky Chargers, and they were NEVI award winners. So with that, there were a lot of sites planned throughout the center of the state. So that's something that I was really looking forward to. And again, NEVI is kind of up in the air. Hopefully they can move forward with it, or hopefully California pre-funds it and sees if they can get the money from the federal government, however that works. But the sites that they have, and I think I saw another one planned for Chula Vista in Southern California. So they have some really good, compelling sites that they could be putting in that just provide an extra layer of options for EV drivers.
Well, very exciting times. And Eric, I'm sure we'll be speaking again in the not too distant future, because right now California seems to be in the spotlight with multiple different CPOs. And much appreciated for coming on, filling in the color for this one station here that is starting to signal good times to come.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Walter.
Okay. Thank you, Eric, for filling in the background story for the station. And so, yes, it's open, but no, it's not open. And so it is open, but it's not really open. But it's nice to see that the North State of California is starting to get some love, much needed. Also, last week, I interviewed Alan Yates about the Loves Project. And this week, sure enough, we had a new Loves station open up in Ritzville, Washington. But similar to the Mercedes-Benz high-powered charging network, sometimes they'll wink a site is open in the alternative fuel database, but it's not really fully commissioned yet and available for service. So although it's showing in the alternative fuels data center database and you go there to have expect a charge, make sure you have a backup option, because similarly, that station might only be partially open or in a form of testing. A couple other CPOs of note this past week. Pilot Flying J opened 3 stations, one of which was in Gillette, Wyoming. And the upper Great Plains are notorious for being very difficult charging deserts to get through. But we'll get to what Tesla has done. They've filled in a lot of the dark areas of the map this week as well. But Pilot Flying J opened Gillette, Wyoming, over on the eastern half of the state. They also opened a station in what's known as Rising Fawn, Georgia, and is just across the border with Alabama in Georgia on Interstate 59. A viewer chimed in, actually Alan Yates again, mentioning, because he actually lives near there, saying that that stretch of Interstate 59 between Birmingham and Chattanooga, there's basically no charging at all, no DC fast charging. So Pilot Flying J adding a station on 59 in Rising Fawn was good business on their part, because they're now the sole DC fast charger operators in their route. Additionally, Oakwood, Illinois, near the Indiana border. Let's see what else is going on. EVGo opened 6 stations, but not really, because one of the stations, Mandarin Landing in Jacksonville, Florida, was open previously, so I'm not quite sure why that's showing again, a bit of an anomaly. And this again is data being pulled from the Alternative Fuels Data Center database, which is a government data set, which can be a little bit kludgy because there's multiple chefs in the kitchen there. But normally, EVGo has very clean data, and I'm not quite sure why we're seeing Mandarin Landing a second time. But additionally to that, they opened multiple other stations, one of which was in Kent, Washington, in the Pacific Northwest, and several other ones indicating that their build progress is continuing on an upswing. Next, Electrify America opened a station in Asheville, North Carolina. And again, last week I mentioned how the Rivian Adventure Network opened a station in Asheville, North Carolina at the Asheville Outlet Mall. This time it's Electrify America opening a station in Asheville, North Carolina at a place called the Forest Ridge Shopping Center. So it's nice to hear that the Western North Carolina area, which Asheville is the capital of, is getting builds of electric vehicle charging, because I know I used to live in that area. There's a lot of EV enthusiasts and not a lot of charging for non-Teslas. If you're in a Tesla, there's basically 3 supercharger stations in Asheville, which is ample. But if you're in a non-Tesla, it's pretty slim pickings. So having these 2 major CPOs, Electrify America and the Rivian Adventure Network, both open stations back to back, basically in 1 week's time, is a major improvement. Lastly, let's go to Tesla, because they opened a whopping 16 stations, which is above average for them in a given week. And their additions to the Alternative Fuel Data Center database are done with a single file once a week getting updated. So sometimes, depending on how their station count opens throughout the time prior to the submission of that file, there's a bit of fluctuation. So it's not very accurate as far as like in a week, but this week's file had 16 stations that were new additions to the Alternative Fuels Data Center database. And let me just go over some of these really quick. There's one in Davis, California, 20 stalls. And I heard from Eric at the News Coolum channel that it is a pretty congested parking lot. So putting in 20 supercharger stalls in that parking lot is going to be a little bit of a congestion issue. But we'll see how it works out. At least those stalls are there. So if a couple get iced, hopefully they all don't, and it helps the situation to some extent. Additionally, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more in the state of California, specifically Newark, San Ramon, Milpitas, San Jose, and Cortez. San Jose. Cortez is Colorado. But the other news that I thought was very interesting is in the state of Idaho, which seems like a strange place to have a trifecta in, but the Tesla Supercharger team did 3 stations in the state of Idaho this week: Mountain Home, American Falls, and Blackfoot, Idaho. Thanks for watching.